Welcome to Raw Talent, a podcast from Shore Capital Partners focused on the real work of developing people and building stronger organizations. In this series, members of our talent development team have candid conversations about what it really takes to grow leaders and strengthen teams. Talent development is not just a program. It's the everyday work of coaching, feedback, stretch opportunities, and accountability that shapes performance over time. Each episode explores the real challenges companies face when developing people and the lessons learned along the way. All right, we're going to move into our third episode.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
This one is the performance metrics that actually matter in a high growth company. And this is the episode where we kind of say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't make good people decisions just on vibes. You can't assume that just because your performance management system has numbers in it, your dashboard has numbers, that they're telling you the truth. And so really what we're going to explore here is if you're going to make a smart decision about replacing, hiring, bringing new people in, changing roles, you really need to make sure you have honest data
Mm-hmm.
and that it's showing up in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
Is this not just living somewhere in HR world?
Right.
Does it actually end up on the business development kind of report out?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's actually start with a question. When leaders say that someone is performing, what are they usually talking about? What are they measuring? And then what are they missing?
In my experience, most commonly, what they're measuring is what someone did versus their goals and expectations versus how they did it.
Mm.
And how usually comes second. And I think in our environment, the how is almost, I can't say more important. It is equally as important just because of the dynamic nature of our businesses. So how you're doing something is going to transcend to the next thing that you have to do versus just delivering that specific result in a discrete moment.
I love that distinction because the how is more the indicator of whether or not they're going to be able to evolve with where the company's going, not just do the thing that's today.
I mean, I think what we're talking about is like an outcome only mindset is incredibly dangerous in our environment.
For sure.
It links back to something that we touched on in prior episodes, which is just because someone's doing really well doesn't mean they work well with their team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are they living up to the core values?
Yeah.
Do they execute in a way that exemplifies who we are as a company and how we want our people to show up? So talk a little bit about the dangers of output only measurement.
Well, I always say, if you hear somebody say in this environment, if you hear somebody saying like, why are you giving me this feedback? I'm doing my job. Then it's a big old red flag, right? Like I'm doing my job is like, I'm following the law, right? And you can't build a great society with everybody just following the law because that's the baseline safety net for what it means to, you have to stop at stop signs. You have to do these things. But if you just said, you know, that your neighbor's blasting music all the time and they're like, well, I'm not breaking the law. That's the same thing as, well, you can tell me that, but I'm doing my job. Like you have to think about in this environment the people who are going to ask you questions, think about how you get better, ask other people questions, support the development of each other, provide peer feedback. And those things don't get codified in the I'm doing my job kind of mentality.
Let's actually dig into that part about codification. And I'm wondering if you have any best practices or tips for folks if they want to move to a performance management system that isn't just output, but it actually brings in expectations around how someone lives out a company value, how they show up on their team. How can they effectively do that instead of just looking at KPIs?
You embed it into that process. So you're not just looking at KPIs or just numbers. The other data that you're bringing, and I'll say just because it's not a number doesn't mean it's not data, but the other data that you're bringing to that conversation is you add a question, how is this person living out the core values? You know, how do they interface with their peers? And I would suggest that you're looking at their role and talking about what are perhaps the most important values that they need to be demonstrating in this particular role. And that even like it tightens it a little further and brings it a little bit more to home for every individual and what they're doing and how they're doing it. Shocker, Disney does this. What is the behavior that you need to demonstrate in order to live out our mission? And they break it down by individual roles.
And I think that just to push that even further in my head, is that means you're not necessarily codifying the explicit, exact behaviors, but you know what they are. So you don't just say excellence or integrity. You say, this could look like these 3 types of behaviors facing a customer, facing a team member, facing the executive team, whatever, that you've done at least some work to say, in your evaluation principles, what could this look like in practice? So it's not just completely from scratch or applying an interpretation in the moment or those kinds of things. Because I think the reality is to that notion of living the values, you want other people on the team. I want everybody on my team to see it when Jackson is stepping up and being a great team member. It shouldn't just be me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I ask if teamwork is one of our values, and I ask 6 people on a team to talk to each other or to assess how each is doing related to teamwork, they should be able to show up and see what you've done. Doesn't have to be the same way. It's probably something I never saw, but they should be able to see that, and they should be paying attention to that. And that becomes a culture around performance. I used to say in my company, like, I want you to catch each other doing well. I don't want you to catch each other doing the wrong thing. Like, I want you to tell me, I want you to tell each other when you do something right. And get in that kind of habit. And so I do think that becomes a system of aligning those values and in expectation of knowing that we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about what they look like. You're going to be asked what they look like from your peers. And you're going to ask, in the last quarter, what have you done that demonstrates this? Like, this doesn't have to be rocket science. It has to be intentional.
And it doesn't have to be incremental. And when I say that, I mean, let's just use this example. What are the ways that you can be incorporating that into your broader system? So when you're doing an interview and you're interviewing a candidate and you ask them, what does this core value mean to you? It's important to us. What does it mean to you? How do you demonstrate that is one example. Town halls, many of our companies have living our core values shout outs. And when you do that, you're essentially reinforcing, reinforcing the behavior. So there are many ways for you to reinforce the system within the system without necessarily having to put something on top of what you're already doing.
And I think to the spirit of this conversation is recognize that as performance management. One of our companies does those kinds of shout outs in their daily huddles. So there's some recognition by one team member in a 5-minute huddle every day about how the team lived one of their values the day before. That is performance management. That is setting expectations. That's adding clarity to our previous conversations. So I think that's just not what people necessarily think of as performance management, but it is fundamental to it.
I think with that phrase, what people don't necessarily think about performance management, I want to transition this a bit. Let's say that we got the performance management part right.
Yeah.
Let's say we've not just focused on outcomes. We've designed a system that really does take into consideration how someone gets there or kind of the inputs along the way. That still doesn't solve for the context, the broader kind of situation we talked about in prior episodes. What are some human capital metrics that aren't just about individual people, but are at the broader kind of systems level that give you some signal and not just noise? And so, like, in my mind, one example would be turnover around the problem performer. What are some of these signals that folks should be looking at that aren't just people focused, but team and business focused?
I think there are leading indicators and there are the lagging indicators. So there's turnover, there's engagement, there's promotion within the company, or are you hiring people externally in order to promote? Those are all indicators of how well you're managing your system performance. One of the things, looking back at it, one of the things that I don't think many people do is look at their performance management system as a database of information for future action. So being able to say, wow, look at all, let's cut this by all of our managers. What was their key improvement area? And is there a trend or a theme there? And should we be using that information to circle back and educate them on performance management conversations or educate them on communicating to your teammates. How are we using the information that we're like actually gathering in this performance review process to proactively influence performance versus waiting for the scorecard to tell us that it's not what we wanted?
Yeah, that raises something else. We may hit this in another area, but it seems important to kind of stamp right now is part of that same sort of thinking, and you've seen this far more than I, but I've worked with companies where they're implementing performance management at the new kind of platform level.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say you've got 5 different managers, and, one manager's, everybody's says everybody's doing great work. And the team's performing well, but then you've got one who everything looks green, but then the performance is starting to slip, and then you start, and so part of the pattern has to also to do with the system that includes the manager and how they're doing this work, if it is not your direct role in performance management. So we started this whole season by saying, look at yourself first. Was clarity there? Were expectations clear? Did they know what performance looks like? I think as the company grows and you're empowering managers, you've got to look at the variability and consistency and inconsistency across those managers and ask yourself the same questions. Because you could have a period of time where things look good, but it's because a particular manager is actually struggling having the difficult conversations, which then is a time bomb, right? Something's going to break, and you're not going to see it coming. And so I just want to, like, that reflective lens that we talked about in the first episode, I think is a moment here to also say, are all of our managers, are all of the people managing performance working under a common set of skills and understanding and so forth about what that looks like?
You said something earlier and I answered, and I don't think I really answered your question. So I wanted to come back to that. I was thinking most of our companies, and actually most companies, don't have enough longitudinal data to be able to connect through the employee life cycle. Like, was this a good hire? What was their 30, 60, 90-day retention rate? What's their engagement rate? And how does that indicate if there's going to be turnover or performance issues? But that's real, and I've worked in organizations where you can make those connections. So getting back to focusing on engagement, if you're looking at a scorecard and you're looking at your performance, your business performance, one of the things I really want to know is what's happening with my engagement, because if it's dropping or if it's not high, I can expect that I am going to have turnover or I'm going to have performance issues. And I think that is the kind of information that we want to be able to glean, and that you want to have. You want to know what those indicators are of what's going to happen next so that you can get in front of it.
Mm-hmm. I think in an ideal state, you really do want these people metrics, your human capital metrics, to show up on the same dashboard as the rest of the business.
Absolutely.
Would you say that most companies do that?
No.
Take a breath and think about it first.
No.
So what happens when they don't? You could.
Yeah.
Why is it important?
Yeah.
Or what happens when they don't?
One of the reasons I think they don't show up is because they don't feel as immediate and as urgent. And they also are not as mathematically measurable. So that tends to, I think, dampen the credibility of like the urgency of doing something. And so when they don't, then what ends up happening is you end up with a fire drill, which is unfortunate. Sometimes you have managers and leaders who are good enough to just inherently know what to do, and they just don't get into that situation. But again, I will bring us back to our environment in microcap. All of your natural tendencies are impacted by the speed with which you need to move. And some of those are probably not going to make the speed race. And so they're going to drop unless you have something systemically in place that's causing you to stop and manage them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the way that I would kind of reframe thinking about the question, because I would suspect that aren't many C-suites that if you ask them wouldn't say, our people are the most important part of our business. Our people are the key. Why would they not be on the dashboard with business performance, right? So there's a kind of a mental model disconnect between a values statement that we value our people, our customers love our people are who make this whole thing hum. And then, but when we start to say, what's the most important part of the business, we don't include the people side. So if you just reframe that a little bit, it's like, oh, well, of course that should be on there.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're talking about rapid growth, if you have turnover, you're not only creating a gap between today and that next emergent state, you're losing institutional knowledge that's creating a bigger gap in the historical state. So product knowledge, vendor knowledge, customer knowledge, all of that very quietly creates grind when you have attrition that's regrettable. And that is definitely going to impact your business. And so like if you're looking at customer retention, then paying attention to retention and performance measures in the people interacting with your customer only makes sense.
It's almost like those things could be looked at together.
Yeah, you would think, what a novel idea, right? But like if you just realize and think about that and reframe it from business metric dashboard that's the sort of starts with finance or financials, and think of it more like your business dashboard that talks about the health of your business. That includes leading and lagging indicators. That includes the financial information. Then you start, like your logic switches and it's like, well, why wouldn't we have that as part of our regular dashboard reviews?
The other connection that we don't make, and that I think would be super impactful, is the cost of turnover. And believe me, I argued it with people many times. And to me, even if you're not going to define it or measure it the same way or include all the same information, it's still expensive. Even with the minimal things that you would agree upon, it's still expensive for all the reasons that you mentioned. And if we could make a better connection between the financial, the cost impact of our people health and effectiveness, that would be huge in order to gain alignment, pay attention, drive some focus.
Well, and I'll just layer this on because it just came to mind as I was listening to you, Cynthia. Jackson's done some work with one of our companies over the last year around professional development for frontline team members.
For sure. Awesome.
So it's not just the HR numbers at a certain level, because what this company recognized is we have a way of thinking, we generally have a way of thinking about frontline team members being less expensive, turnovers less expensive, and those kinds of things, to your point about the cost, because they're an hourly employee or they're an hourly team member or whatever that might be. And we forget that those are the people talking to our customers first. And so when we start to have customer attrition issues, those are the people talking to our customers first. And so I just think it's worth thinking about or highlighting that it's not just at a certain level of the organization that we're thinking about aligning these kinds of HR measures. It's top to bottom.
The volume with attrition is really, really significant. I mean, a significant impact. And that volume will be more likely to happen at the lower levels of the organization. And then what happens is that churn really wears on those who haven't left.
Yeah,
because they're picking up the pieces, they're closing the gap and stretching while you're covering before someone else new comes on board. The new person comes on board and they need to get trained. It's exhausting for the people who are there.
Yeah,
as well.
Whether it's a conversation around making a choice to invest in frontline employees, whether it's including a certain metric on a dashboard to make a connection between retention and customer churn.
Yeah.
Or if it's a conversation that you just talked about related to the cost of turnover, all of that assumes that the company has a talent strategy. And so that's actually, if you notice, we're kind of zooming out and out through these episodes. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in episode 4. And before we make that transition, I took some notes here. It seems like the big idea that we're going to take away is that measurement shapes judgment. And that if you only measure the output, you're going to miss some of these people costs, the effects of a manager, and the system kind of signals that matter throughout.
Mm-hmm.
It does no good to anyone if they're hitting a number, but they're just terrible to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and or leaving or burning out. And like you all said, I think you captured it really well earlier in this episode. Lagging indicators are only going to tell you where you've been.
Mm.
It's those leading indicators that should shape where you're going and make it actionable on that dashboard that you mentioned. And so in this next episode, the question we're going to answer is, do you actually have a talent strategy, or are you just reacting?
Great.
Cool.
If you enjoyed this episode, check out other Raw Talent episodes at www.shorecp.university/podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. Here you will find our Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Microcap Moments, and Everyday Heroes series, each highlighting the people and stories that make investing in the lower middle market unique. This podcast was narrated by Jackson Sprayberry, created and produced by Austin Johnson, editing by Podhouse Productions. This podcast is the property of Shore Capital Partners, LLC. None of the content herein is investment advice, an offer of investment advisory services, nor a recommendation or offer relating to any security. See the Terms of Use page on the Shore Capital website for other important information.